The Apostle Paul here in our Ephesians text says that we are to live wisely, not unwisely. We're to make the most of the time of our lives. Now, the word that Paul uses here for time, the Greek word that Paul uses here for time is the word kairos, K-A-I-R-O-S. Now, Paul could have used the word chronos, C-H-R-O-N-O-S, from which comes our word chronology. And if he'd used the word chronos, he would have been speaking of routine, matter-of-fact, tick of the clock, ordinary, everyday time. Chronos is routine, matter-of-fact, tick of the clock, everyday, ordinary time. But instead, Paul chose intentionally the word kairos. Kairos is special time. It is God-centered time. It is soul-enriching time. It is spirit-lifting time. And so what Paul essentially says here is, make sure that the time of your life is God-focused, soul-enriching time. Make sure that the time of your life is God-focused, soul-enriching time. And so what I want to do this morning is share with you 6 principles by which you can experience God-focused, soul-enriching time, and 6 principles by which I can experience God-focused, soul-enriching time. First principle, go easy on the imperfections of others. I hope you're not one of those persons who is constantly criticizing others. One of those persons who can't wait for somebody to make a mistake so you can point it out to them. There are people like that, but I hope you're not one of them. And there are 2 cautions for us who might seem to be overly critical. The first is Jesus was very clear that that was unacceptable. Jesus was very clear and in fact was harsh in some of his statements about having a judgmental spirit or about being overly critical of others. Remember Matthew 7:1 where he says, "Judge not that you be not judged, for with the measure you judge is the measure with which you will be judged." Now that's pretty sobering if you think about it. The degree to which I criticize or judge someone else is the degree to which I myself will be judged. So the first caution for those of us who tend to be overly critical is listen to Jesus and be careful. But the second caution is critical people are miserable people. Have you ever met someone who is overly critical in spirit and in heart and in action who is really happy? Most of the overly critical people, if not all of the overly critical people I've known, are absolutely miserable. Absolutely miserable people. Paul said, live wisely, not unwisely. And I think if you allow yourself to be overcritical of others, you're living unwisely. And I'm living unwisely. Second principle, don't sweat the small stuff. Don't sweat the small stuff. Now that phrase comes, as I think you know, from a book that Richard Carlson wrote in 1996 titled, "Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and It's All Small Stuff." Now I do disagree with the part of his title that says it's all small stuff. It's not all small stuff. Losing a loved one is not small stuff. Fear of losing your job is not small stuff. Battling a critical, serious illness is not small stuff. Facing a broken relationship in your life is not small stuff. But having said that, so much of that which we let upset us in life, which we let get to us, is really small stuff, little things. Here's my list. The little inconveniences, the little disruptions, the little disappointments, the little hurts, the little irritations, the little frustrations. If you and I are honest with ourselves, we are prone to let those little things of life, that small stuff of life, get to us when it shouldn't. And one of the examples that Richard Carlson uses in his book is that of being in traffic and seeing someone drive erratically and inappropriately. Here's what he says. That guy just cut in front of you without even using a blinker. And look at him. He's going 50 in a 35-mile-an-hour speed zone. It's enough to make you scream. Now, I'm just going to confess right here in this part of the sermon that this very week, as I was working on this sermon. I was driving down Germantown Parkway, and some guy was whipping in and out of traffic, going well over the speed limit, and this phrase came into my mind: what a jerk. Well, then I come back to my office and I write myself a note and say, I'm going to preach a sermon on have you ever met a jerk? And then I continue to work on my sermon, and Richard Carlson, or God, speaks to me through Richard Carlson. Listen again. It's enough to make you scream, but don't. Take a deep breath and realize traffic is out of your control. All the screaming in the world won't make that guy be a more considerate driver. So make up your mind to not let it bother you. Put it in a relaxing tape, take that deep breath, and let it go. So many of the small things in our life just need to be let go. If you want your life to be God-centered and soul-enriching, you've got to learn to give up letting the small things get to you. Third principle, keep a sense of awe and wonder about life. Keep a sense of awe and wonder about life. I sure hope you still have a childlike spirit about life. I don't care what age you are. I hope you still have a childlike spirit about life. There's nothing sadder than a person having an old spirit and an old attitude about life. One of my favorite poems, as you may know, is the poem by Walt Whitman, Miracles. In 1855, Walt Whitman collected a group of his poems, 12 in fact, and he decided to publish them himself because no one else would publish them. And that notable collection was titled Leaves of Grass, which is a classic. And among the 12 poems that Walt Whitman wrote is one called Miracles, whose opening words are this: why, who makes much of a miracle? As to me, I know nothing but miracles. And then he goes on to say, whether I walk the streets of Manhattan, or dart my sight over the roofs of houses toward the sky, or wade with naked feet along the beach just in the edge of the water, or stand under trees in the woods, or talk by day with anyone I love, or sit at table at dinner with my mother, or watch honeybees busy around the hive of a summer forenoon, or animals feeding in the fields, or birds, or the wonderfulness of insects in the air, or the wonderfulness of the sundown, or of stars shining so quiet and bright. These, with the rest, one and all, are to me miracles. To me, every hour of the light and dark is a miracle. Every cubic inch of space is a miracle. Every square yard of the surface of the earth is spread with the same. Every spear of grass, the frames, limbs, organs of men and women, and all that concerns them, all these to me are the unspeakable, perfect miracles. To me, the sea is a continual miracle. The fishes that swim, the rocks, the motion of the waves, the ships with men in them, what stranger miracles are there? Do you still see miracles? When you leave this place this day and go back into the chronos of life, into the mundane, routine, tick-of-the-clock schedule of your life, we'll be so lost in chronos that you miss the wonder of it all. Every single moment of every single day, surrounded by, touched by, moved by, empowered by miracle. Every one of us. To live kairos is to keep that childlike sense of wonder about life and creation and all that happens, which leads to a corollary principle, fourth principle: look at life and be grateful. Look at life and be grateful. Your life's not perfect. My life's not perfect. Things aren't going the way you would like them to go every minute of every day. Things don't go the way I want them to go every minute of every day. There are disappointments in your life. There are disappointments in my life. There are things that are happening in your life and happening in my life. If I could have a list of the things I didn't want to happen in my life, they would be on that list. That's true of every single one of us. None of us have perfect lives. And some people learn, in spite of that, to have a sense of contentment with God's help about life. Some people can look at all that goes wrong, see the disappointments, see the frustrations, and learn to look at that with a sense of gladness about the things that are good because they see the good even amidst the difficulty. They're contented in spite of. But then there are the if only people. If only I had the job I want. If only this hadn't happened to me. If only my family situation were better. If only I weren't dealing with this particular challenge. If only I had more money. If only I had the job he has or she has. If only I had the opportunity he has or she has. If only I had the talent he has or she has. If only this would be true in my life, then I would be fulfilled. What, again, a sad place to be. That you live your life, if only. If only something were different. If only somebody were different. If only the circumstances of my life were different, then I could kairos. Those who experience God-focused, soul-enriching time are those who learn to look at life with all of its disappointments and its frustrations and still thank God for the goodness of life. Fifth principle, find your area of compassion. If you really want to experience the time of your life spiritually, find your area of compassion. I said 2 weeks ago that the happiest people I know are Christ-like people, that Christ-like people are the happiest people I know. And I asked those who were here that Sunday morning to think about the person in your life that you consider most Christ-like, and then to ask yourself, if it's not the case, that that person also happens to be one of the happiest people you know, right? That the happiest people we know are the most Christ-like people we know. And when you think about that, one of the core components, characteristics of the life of Jesus was compassion. I mean, if you talk about Christ-likeness, one of the major core truths is compassion. Will Willimon is a name I mention often. He's a retired bishop in the United Methodist Church. I love his theological insights. I love his writings. He tells about the occasion when he was dean of the chapel at Duke University, and he invited to lunch one of the wealthiest men in Durham, North Carolina. And he invited him to lunch so that he could get a major contribution to the improvements of the chapel at Duke University. And so he invited this very wealthy man to lunch, and they chit-chatted a while, and then just as Will Willimon was about to give his pitch for raising the funds for the improvement of the chapel, the businessman said to him, "Dr. Willimon, do you know how many unvaccinated children there are in North Carolina?" And he said, "Well, no, I really don't." He said, "Dr. Willimon, there are 300,000 unvaccinated children in the state of North Carolina." And Will Willimon said, "Goodness gracious, that really bothers me." The gentleman leaned across the table and he said to Will Willimon, "You know what bothers me, Dr. Willimon? That you're a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ and you didn't know there are 300,000 unvaccinated children in the state of North Carolina. That you're a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ and you didn't know there are 300,000 unvaccinated children in the state of North Carolina. You can't solve every problem. I can't solve every problem. You're not called into every arena of need, and I'm not called into every arena of need, but each of us is called into some arena of need. And you will never, ever know your time as Kairos time until you find that niche of compassion that is yours. You don't have to go to Kenya if that's not your thing. You don't have to join our wonderful Habitat ministry if that's not your thing. You don't have to volunteer for Caldwell Guthrie mentoring program if that's not your thing. But let me tell you, there's some place in Shelby County, there's some place in Memphis, Tennessee, there's some place in Germantown, Tennessee, where your niche of compassion is needed. And until you claim that and give that, much of your time will be chronos, not kairos. Final principle. Stand strong in the strength of God. Stand strong in the strength of God. I want to mention 3 names that you know quite well. Amanda Berry, Gina De Jesus, and Michelle Knight. There's not a person in this sanctuary who doesn't know the names Amanda Berry, Gina De Jesus, and Michelle Knight. You wish you didn't know those names. But for 10 years, upward to 10 years, Amanda Berry, Gina De Jesus, and Michelle Knight were imprisoned by Ariel Castro in Cleveland, Ohio. You know that. It's horrific when you think about it, isn't it? The emotional, mental, physical, sexual abuse that those 3 young women experienced. Horrific. Unbelievable. Unbelievable that he could do it. Unbelievable the horror of what they went through. Well, I don't know if you know now, they've spoken. That Amanda Berry, Gina De Jesus, and Michelle Knight have spoken. It's on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, you need to rush out and see it. It's called the Thank You video. And it came out July the 9th. They filmed it July the 2nd in a lawyer's office. It came out July the 9th. Let me just tell you some of the things that they say. Amanda Berry says, first and foremost, I want everyone to know how happy I am to be home with my family, my friends. I'm getting stronger each day, and having my privacy is helping immensely. All Gina De Jesus said was, I thank everyone for their support. And then Michelle Knight speaks. Now keep in mind, Michelle Knight was held the longest, and she was the most abused. Here's what Michelle Knight says on that video. I may have been to hell and back, but I am strong enough to walk through hell with a smile on my face and my head held high. I will not let the situation define who I am. I am in the control of my destiny with the help of God. God has a plan for me. Now, I'm not naive, and you're not naive, and they're not naive. Their journey of recovery is not over by any means. Period. They know that. But for a young woman who spent 10 years in such horrific circumstances to say, I walked through hell, but my head's held high. And he won't define me, and that 10 years won't define me. My destiny is in my hands with God's help. It's like what the psalmist said. But I trust in you, Lord. I say you are my God. My times are in your hands. When you stand strong with God's help, whatever life brings, you know soul-enriching, spirit-lifting time. I want you to have the time of your life, says Paul. Have the time of your life. Now, in our culture, if you say have the time of your life, there are all sorts of connotations, aren't there? Paul says, I want you to have the kairos moments of life. God-focused, spirit-enriching, soul-lifting. How do you do that? Go easy on the imperfections of others. Don't let the small stuff get to you. Keep that childlike sense of wonder and all about it all. Walk out every day and say, wow. And look at life, whatever's gone wrong with it, and see what's good about it. And be grateful. Find your niche of compassion. where God wants you to serve and you're needed. And whatever you face, however great the tragedy or the pain, stand strong knowing your destiny today and tomorrow is defined by you with God, not by anything else. Thanks be to God. Amen. I call your attention now to